What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Poll Rundown. This one is a little different. This time we're going to be going over and reviewing the old school priority poll. If you don't know what or are unfamiliar with the priority polls, basically it's Jagex trying to get a feel for what the community wants in general. There's a couple things specifically I want to talk about. Basically a little hypocrisy from the player base. Not necessarily their fault, but some contradicting things we'll see on the way here that were brought to my attention. But also just, let's talk about and reflect on what the community wants. I think this is an important thing to look at for, to reflect on as the community. So we're going to kick right into it. We'll go through these first few pretty quickly. There aren't a lot of standouts, but where there are, we will certainly note them, because this stuff can be a little hard to get through. As you can see with this first question, all these different responses, they are sorted by, least important to most important. However, it can be a little difficult to kind of gauge where the community is at on things. So, moving right along, you can see that mid-level content, and it's pretty clear with these first three questions, they're all about PVM, low level, mid-level, high level. Pretty easy to tell that most of the old school player base is mid to high level. That's pretty easy to tell. No surprise there. More PVM content, I will say, before we move on, is a scary thing for Jagex. We've talked about power creep before in these videos. Power creep basically being the increasing and ever-changing meta of weapons in an MMO like RuneScape. It doesn't have to be an MMO, but MMOs are particularly plagued by power creep. Basically stuff that comes out is more powerful than the previous iteration, and, basically best in slot weapons continue to be replaced and replaced, making old content child's play, making it more difficult for lower level players to come up into the game. And basically it's a game killer. So something to keep in mind with PVM. High level PVM, definitely something that a lot of people want. It is up to Jagex, however, to continue to do their best to, not succumb to power creep. The other issue with that is, of course, if you come out with PVM content that is completely worthless and doesn't have anything to chase after, whether it be loot or new weapons, just general loot that makes you money, or some new fancy item, it's basically dead content. So we'll see a lot of this going forward. I have a feeling that Jagex is really close to the threshold of the game will have to change fundamentally. It's about this time of time that's passed that Nex armors and Nex, the God Wars boss, came out in RS3, based on time from August 2007 to the 3.5 years later. So we'll see how this goes. Should be interesting, but not a surprise there. Really, this took longer than I thought, but not a surprise. Lots of people want high level PVM. Moving on to skilling content. Low level skilling, again, not really important, and we see a very similar trend with the votes here. Low level, not important. High level, not as important. You can see there's not as many people who are really into skilling, but again, this is more of a gauge of how active the player base is, and again, mid to high level. Pretty simple there. Here we go through it on questing, and as you can see, once again, kind of another step down where we're seeing less people interested in questing, which no real surprise there. Quests take a lot of time. Unfortunately, the old school team does not really have a dedicated enough and large enough team. And by dedicated enough, I don't mean that their effort is low. I just mean they don't have a dedicated few people who can just churn out quests like they used to. So definitely something that takes Jagex a lot of time, as we saw with Monkey Madness 2. Good quest, but a little underwhelming, I guess. They came out with a lot of stuff. New PVM that, certainly changed the way things work. Lots of new items. But they can't come out with quests like that all the time. So you'd basically be getting quests that, follow the standard RuneScape quest formula. Not really new items coming in, and you'd kind of just have, a little story that you could go through. Not something that most players are interested in, and it's reflected here pretty clearly. Quality of life updates. Again, people like quality of life updates, but no surprise here that, people think they're important, but not overwhelmingly. This one, of course, very polarizing. PvP, you have a very vocal part of the player base who is like, yes, like PvP is great. But at the same time, you have a lot of people in this game who do not engage in PvP at all, and that's fairly clear with those results. Player design competitions. Those are... We kind of had one of these a long time ago, and it's been a while since we've had one. Motherlode Mine is the best example of a player-designed concept that got into the game. The one that came out previously, I think it was previously, was the new skill for Artisan, which obviously we didn't see come out. So, not a surprise with those two pieces of content. Motherlode Mine, definitely a success. Rooftop Agility, certainly a success. But Artisan didn't really do so well, and not really a surprise there that people aren't so into other players designing content. They'd prefer Jagex to do it. So there you go. How important is solo content to you? Definitely interesting here. Excuse me. It's been a long day making videos. This one definitely surprised me, and I'll kind of explain why. The clanning, people clanning and that kind of thing in RuneScape has always been an important part of, how this game functions. A lot of the biggest issues with old school right now revolve around how hard it is to be a solo player. Excluding Iron Men for a moment, just being someone who doesn't have a trustworthy group of friends to kind of, go PVMing with, it's hard to find that kind of thing. So, solo content, for a lot of people, is the only way they can play the game and, really get the most out of what they want. So no surprise here. I mean, it's surprising, but at the same time, I'm surprised the extreme at which people are in fan of solo content. You can see the two negative portions here basically got 12% of the vote, and the rest all think that this is something that Jagex, they value as important. So that's definitely more than I would have thought. Group content, again, kind of all across the board. These two did surprise me. I'm not surprised at... I expected more a graph like this. Nice little kind of bar graph you get going there with the group content. Kind of expected that with the solo content, but didn't really get it, which is, again, why it was surprising. But, when you think about it, not really. But yeah, not really much to touch on there. That's just kind of how people do it. And again, these questions are kind of confusing. When Jagex says how important is group content to you, it really should be like, do you want group content to be in the game, right? Or would you prefer solo content? That's kind of how these questions should be interpreted, and that's a lot of the reason you see the way these votes are going. People would prefer to not have to rely on others, no surprise there, and would rather do things for themselves. So there you go. Now, this is where things get interesting. Which of these updates is your first priority? Overwhelming winner, or I should say winner, are a new skill and improving existing skills. Old School has gone without a new skill. The community has managed to shut down both Sailing and Artisan. Artisan more than Sailing. Sailing was very close, though. I think around 72%, somewhere in there. Surprisingly, despite that, a large percentage of people still pushing for that new skill. Now, what does that mean moving forward? It does mean that Jagex is going to have to take that pretty seriously, and it does mean that we're probably going to go through another section of time in which the community is at each other's throats trying to decide which skill they want in the game. That's exciting, but at the same time, like, a little scary because it hasn't worked out so far, and every time we go through this, we waste a lot of development time on trying to figure out how these skills will work so people can properly decide whether they want them. So I'm wary about whether that 25% of people is always going to be in the way of getting a new skill in the game. Hard to say. I think at this point, no matter what new skill Jagex comes out with, as long as it's not summoning, will probably be good. God, excuse me, these yawns. With all this talking. And the reason I'm biased against summoning is because there's no way to make summoning effective in this game without making it extremely overpowered like it was when it first came out. So, anything else I'm kind of game for. Not that I'm going to be excited to train them necessarily. But there you go. Jagex proceeds to ask this question about kind of second and third priority. Don't really need to touch on those. That kind of goes all over the place. Hard to, as like a data collector, if you're Jagex, looking at these numbers, like which is the third priority, it's kind of hard to gauge like what. Okay, well, most of the player base feels that their third thing should be improving existing skills, whereas the you know, a lot of the player base thinks the second priority should also be improving existing skills. Hard to really put all that data into like a, like, chug it out and say, like, here's what we've learned, because it's so all over the place. But hopefully Jagex knows what they're doing in that case. I certainly look at those and go, well, there's some things there. Who knows? If we were to release a minigame, which type of minigame would you most like to see? This is basically, and I'll tell you right now, this is a dominated question, in my opinion, by Stealing Creation. Stealing Creation has been basically Jagex's champion, or the community's champion, I should say, basically for, like, you know, here is the minigame we want in the game. We're going to keep bothering you about it, Jagex. And I gotta say, guys, as much as I loved Stealing Creation, and again, we have skilling minigame, PvP, PvM, and a mixture of the above. Stealing Creation was both skilling and PvP. And I'm sure you could work in some PvM in there. Again, apologies for the yawning. It's I'm not really tired. It's just a lot of not breathing properly with all this talking. Anyway, Stealing Creation is a fun minigame. Old School just does not have the player base to sustain a new minigame. We have tons of them. It's not for lack of interest. You know, like, let's put it this way. Castle Wars is fun. All these other minigames are fun. Stealing Creation is, the only hope it has is if it's new to the meta for skilling. Now, the problem with Stealing Creation, some people don't understand this, but the rewards from Stealing Creation, the rewards that give you double XP in construction, you know, those tools that give you basically double XP, it's not worth your time to go get those tools. It's a nice change of pace in some cases, and people who want to spend more time getting their 99, but less time doing the actual skill, good. That's, Stealing Creation is for you. But from an actual efficient level, it's not worth it. Stealing Creation is a total waste of time. In a lot of ways, especially in a game where you can make, you know, 2 to 3 mil an hour at Zulrah. Even for a skill like construction, the time you save and the money you save and the time you save that you'd have to make that money, it's just not going to be worth it. So as much as I like Jagex talking about minigames, it frustrates me because if they come out with a minigame, there's going to be some power creep involved to make it useful, and unfortunately, I feel like it'll be dead content very, very quickly. So I wish I could have, like, answered, I don't want a minigame in Old School, mainly because I just don't see a positive outcome from a minigame. And again, I use Stealing Creation as the example because it's the one that so many people want. I can't imagine Jagex just copying, pasting at this point. They've really started. Oh my god. Slap myself a little bit. They've really started to make content unique. There hasn't been a lot of copy-paste from old RuneScape iterations recently. So there you go. Interestingly enough. So I don't know if Stealing Creation would make it. Maybe a clone of some sort. But again, I think it would be dead content after a very short amount of time. Especially with Last Man Standing coming into the game. That has the benefit of being PvP and also, like, a way for people to make money at the same time. So I don't know, another minigame past Last Man Standing, I don't know if I can get behind it. Either way, moving on, these last two, which are the funny questions, kind of at least. If we were to release a skill, which skill would you most like to see? Dungeoneering wins that one by 4%. Sailing, the one that has been advertised in Old School to be unique to Old School, follows it up, followed by Summoning, Artisan, and Animal Husbandry. Dungeoneering could be interesting in Old School. Reward-wise, who knows what they do to make it useful, but interesting that a lot of people want Dungeoneering in the game. Sailing following right behind. Good to see the old Sailing supporters coming out strong. And of course, Summoning, again, just don't think it has a place in Old School. Artisan, interesting that Artisan got as much support as it did. Animal Husbandry, of course, suffering the lack of description that Jagex has ever given to it. All four of those skills either exist in RS3 or have been fleshed out pretty much entirely by the Old School team. So Animal Husbandry surprisingly gets 9%. I'm surprised it's not lower based on how nobody knows anything. But here are the last two questions, and forgive me because I'm going to have to change the window capture here just a second. Bring this on down here so you guys can see it. If we were to release a city, what kind of city would you like to see? city which finishes in the existing area, that being like Menaphos in the desert or the Elven city. City in a new area, not getting much stuff. Or a cool new underwater city. None of this has been touched on ever before by Jagex. So, who knows? Could be anything, but underwater city. Sure. Personally, me would love to see them finish an area that's already in the game. You can easily create new content that's just as exciting as a brand new place, because it is a brand new place. You can't get in the Elven City. You can't get in Menaphos. So definitely would like to see content that's technically already there actually be there for real, rather than them waste their time adding more landmass to what we already have. As we know, Zaya is a giant waste of space. It's a good content. Let's be real. Zaya came with good content, and there's good stuff on Zaya. Problem is, it's too big for its own good. You look at every other city, how condensed it is. It takes so long to walk from one side of a city in Zaya to the other. It's also really blocky and not designed the best way it could have possibly been. Kind of a shame, but here we are. Anyway, if we were to release a quest, what kind of quest would you like to see? A brand new quest and storyline, or a quest which continues an unfinished storyline? Again, lots of the player base siding to, let's come out and finish old stuff. Again, if we move back to that previous question, a city which finishes an existing area, people kind of straight up going back, you know, let's finish stuff we already have and like flesh that out. And then the hypocrisy I mentioned at the beginning of this video. If you've made it this far, congratulations, you're here for the final punchline. Which of the following two types of content are you most interested in? The overwhelming majority is brand new content. And yet, we have things like, I want dungeoneering. Where is it? I lost it. I want dungeoneering. I want summoning. You have, again, there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on here with people who want things from the olden days, but also clearly want brand new content that's unique. I know there's voting overlap, and it's hard to say that everyone who voted for summoning and dungeoneering also voted for brand new content unique to old school, but this is the main point I'm trying to make with this question. There is a very clear divide there, and let's put it this way. Despite the fact that brand new content unique to old school wins that poll, everywhere else, people say that you should stick to stuff that's basically in old school and improve upon it, including in some of those priority questions about, you know, improving, you know, and expanding on existing skills. That was big. So it's a very, very interesting thing. I'm not sure if the community just has their head in their asses or if this is just kind of a fluke. But if I'm Jagex and I see the rest of this poll and then I get to this question and I see that people want brand new, unique content, that's kind of weird. So who knows? I'd love to know what you guys think, though. This has been quite a long video. If you've made it through the whole thing, kudos to you. Thanks so much. Don't forget to leave a like and check out the rest of the vacation playlist. I will be back on Saturday, back to live streaming, probably Last Man Standing and Master Clues. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to tell me what you think and share your opinions in the comments below. Keep it civilized, and I will see you guys in the next one.